if I were talking to somebody who were 20, I think what I would say is that the important thing is that whatever you choose in this space, that it feels authentic to you.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for any investment decisions.
All right, so Keith, today we're going to talk about spending money and saving money. And this is a different angle to come at financial topics than the sort of more common focus on investing. But it's arguably more important whether you earn, 6% a year on your investment or 9% a year is A, mostly out of your control if you sort of do the standard things, and B, will vary naturally over time and, probably come out in the wash. But how much you save versus how much you spend is a lot more in your control. And so in some ways is a more effective focus if you're thinking about how can I live so that, I save enough money to be comfortable in retirement and do what I want to be able to do with my kids or other members of my family. But before we start, I did want to say something because I feel like sometimes with spending and saving, it can end up in a moralistic kind of mode where there's
don't buy Starbucks.
Yeah, like don't buy Starbucks, and that's wasteful and stupid, and or just other stuff like fancy clothes are terrible and materialist, and I've never been that interested in that stuff. Like I have my own kind of beliefs about my own life, but I've never felt comfortable being too judgy about other people's choices. It's not a space that I am comfortable occupying. So I just want to have that as a caveat. Nothing, and you can say whatever you would like to say, by the way. I don't mean to speak for you here, but just from my angle, I don't say any of what I'm going to say here in a tone that is to suggest that people who do something different are bad or materialist or anything else.
Yeah, that sounds like the right approach to me. I agree with the piece about judgment. I've coached a few people in the last year on their personal finances, and the fear of being judged is such a barrier to people engaging in doing what is frankly hard work to look deeply at one's finances, spending patterns, saving habits. And so I think we have a real interest in being in a judgment-free environment. When I say we, I mean all of us. Because judgment really is an obstacle to change and helping people grow and be better for themselves and their family and their community. So I'm totally on board with that idea.
Cool. So the first principle I wanted to share for sort of how to think about this is something that I've believed for a long time and recently heard articulated well by the finance writer Morgan Housel, who I've been reading for a long time and is a good, clear thinker. If you want to read about any of this stuff, he's a good person to read. But what he said was something like to let go of the instinct to impress people with material possessions. If you can let go of that and kind of free yourself from it, you have accomplished more than half of what we're going to talk about today. It's not easy to do, but I do think it's possible. Maybe the way to think about it is instead of thinking of it in a negative sense in terms of letting go of something or rejecting something, think of it from the other perspective, which is how do you craft an identity? And this is something that by the time people are our age has mostly already happened. So in some ways, this is more useful advice for someone who's younger. But how do you craft an identity, develop a lifestyle, a set of beliefs, a set of hobbies, a way of being in the world, a social network, all these components of an identity that lends itself to not having to spend a lot of money? A couple ways that I think about this are if you can align your personal style, by which I mean things like clothes and furniture, With classic styles, it just means that there's much less pressure to buy a lot of new stuff. Like if the stuff that you wear is kind of always in style, then you're not on this treadmill of like new things come into style every few months or every year or something different is in style. But if your style is button up shirts and blue jeans and like, white sneakers or something, well then that's always in style, or at least enough to not have to buy new stuff all the time.
As you're saying this, I'm thinking about, have a style that's always in style is one path. I feel like mine is to just have clothes that are not in style and just be
never in style,
pretty oblivious about it. As another
totally.
option. Yeah.
I think that's completely right, actually. Just to decide, like, this is not something that's important to me. 100%. That's like just as good. Maybe even better.
Sometimes I think about whether people do make judgments about you based on what you wear. I think inevitably that's true. And so sometimes I think, well, maybe if I was really smart, I'd be more strategic about spending more money on clothes. That the return of that spending, maybe it would result in higher salaries in my career or more promotions, or it's easier to close deals with potential clients because I give off a different vibe than I give off today. I'm not sure I'm completely sold on this one.
It's a good question. I guess if I were talking to somebody who were 20, I think what I would say is that the important thing is that whatever you choose in this space, that it feels authentic to you. And maybe secondarily, that you're self-aware about it. I think actually self-awareness about these different things does a lot of work. It just generally makes you someone who people are more comfortable around, feel like they can relate to. You can be different from someone, but if you acknowledge like, I'm like, my style is a little bit all over the place. It's an opt-out style or whatever. That goes a long way. But I guess the thing to notice here is that there's a choice. There's a choice about who do I want to be? What do I want to spend my time and energy and, importantly, money on? Is it trying to always have like an up-to-date in-style look, or is it not? And again, there's no right or wrong answer to that question, but it is the case that if you can opt out of that style treadmill, you will not have to spend as much money. Can I throw another one at you?
Go for it.
So another one is around kind of lifestyle and hobbies. And so a few examples of this. If you can decide that a great vacation to you is camping in like a, rural area near where you live, that's great. Like that's a huge money saver compared to other vacation activities. Or if, when you have dinner with friends, if you can make it something where you go to one of your houses and it's either like a potluck or one person cooks and somebody else brings dessert or whatever, just a good way to save money. Or if instead of going out somewhere to brunch, you can do like picnic in the park where you bring food and you sit on a blanket in the park and throw a Frisbee around or baseball or whatever. And I should, again, just say, I like going out to dinner. I like going to brunch at a restaurant. These aren't bad things. They're just more expensive than some of these alternative things, which might be every bit as much fun. And guess what? Maybe even more fun. That's the other thing just to mention here is going camping less fun than like going on some kind of fancy vacation to Florida or Paris or Hawaii or whatever. Depends what you're into. It's not necessarily less, I guess, is the important thing that I'm saying. These things don't have to be sacrifices necessarily. And it, again, depends on how you think about sort of your life, your identity, who you are, what you value, etc.
You're making me think of an area in my life where I guess I would say I made a choice around this, although it doesn't really feel like a choice. It's just that where I personally gravitate to. And that's around food. I love eating out. I love trying different foods that I don't know how to make or I've never heard of. And so when I want to go out, ideally, here in Portland, I might go to a food cart, and there's a Kyrgyz food cart near me that has this lagman dish that I never had before that I really like. And probably my most favorite place to eat in Portland is also a food cart that serves these, it's called bing mi. It's like these Chinese crepes that commonly are eaten for breakfast. And I just love that, and it's good food. These places specialize in doing one or two things really well. But every once in a while, I'll go to a really fancy restaurant, where you may end up spending $50 or $100 per person, and I have the strange experience of, as I'm eating the food, being like, "Oh yeah, this is good," and then I leave, and it kind of just like exits my memory. I don't have very many memories of eating at a high-end restaurant where I'm like, oh, that was such a great experience. All of my food-related memories about eating out are at, hole-in-the-wall places where I live, or inexpensive dishes in, Vietnam or Japan or Germany. And so I kind of think about that, and my food identity is that I kind of really specialized, smaller places. I enjoy that a lot more. But what I'm troubled by is that I don't really know, in the context of this discussion, whether that was a choice. What if I just happened to be someone who really loved like the high-end dining experience?
Yeah.
And like I couldn't like really make a choice to be like, no, food carts, I'm going to deprive myself of the thing I enjoy with food. So what is it? Did I get lucky? Is it because I grew up relatively well off that I don't feel the need to, or the desire to want to go to really expensive places very often? So I, on the one hand, feel it, but I have a lot of question marks about whether this is really a choice. Are our interests a choice?
That's a really good question. And I think maybe it is part of why I've always felt uncomfortable judging how people make these decisions. Maybe there's something about it that people were born with, and it's not really in their control anyway. I don't think that's the only reason I don't like judging people, but it's probably a piece of it. Well, here's kind of a slightly different angle on this, but my wife is from Brazil. We're living here in Rio now, and we got married in 2014. And since then, almost every kind of vacation time off we've gone either to visit my family in New England or her family in Brazil. Our parents have had health problems, and that's been part of it. But also, it's just like we don't live near either of them, and so when we have time, we want to visit our family. So we have not really gone anywhere else pretty much other than Brazil or New England for vacation. And Eloisa, as a kid, has very fond memories of taking trips with her family. And so that's a thing that we have discussed and we'd like to be able to do with our kids, especially while they're still young. And I'm completely on board for this. But it's funny because as a kid, my family took one trip driving across the country one summer. But other than that, basically every vacation we ever took, we went to Maine. And that was amazing. I never felt deprived as a kid because I didn't get to like go on vacations places. And to this day, Maine is very special to me and holds a special place in my heart. And I guess it's another example of like, I didn't choose that. To me, there's no particular principle. And I really liked that we went to the same place for vacation every year. But it's just another example of where do these things come from? Are you born with them? Are you, what are they exactly?
Yeah, well, I think I would be pretty sad if I was only going to visit family in the places where they lived. I mean, I love travel. I love international travel, in part because it allows me to do the food thing that I was talking about a few minutes ago. And so, unlike you, I think this is an area where I feel like my life would be a lot worse if I made the choice not to do what is, probably more expensive travel, especially traveling internationally a lot. But that leads into a thought that I had. One of the things that I do, it's kind of a ritual, a painful, time consuming ritual that I do once a year. But I think it really relates to this question of what are your priorities and what do you value and where do you want to spend money and where do you not. So for a very long time, at the end of every year, I have been downloading every single transaction that I've done in the entire year. And after getting married, collectively downloaded everything and coded each transaction individually in the different categories: travel, food.
Wow.
I do this the old-fashioned way in a spreadsheet. There's something about looking at your data and really sort of going through and being like, gosh, I went to that place 15 times this year.
Right.
Yikes. That makes you think about whether you're being intentional about how you're spending money. And so at the end of the year, I get to see, and there are 15 categories. How much did I spend on garden supplies, seeds and trellises and all the things for my home garden? And do I feel good about that spending?
Right. That's kind of the question. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It's like, oh, I spent like $600 on that. Like, how much joy did I get out of that? A lot.
Yeah.
And then I might look somewhere else and realize, oh, wow, I spent $1,200 doing that thing that I didn't really even like that much. And some of the categories are huge. For me, being self-employed, healthcare is a huge expense. Eating out can be a higher expense, but really understanding how much you spend on things once a year for me helps me kind of refocus. There was a time when I lived in New York City and was spending just a ton at restaurants, and we talked about it and said, I think that we could save a lot of money there and put that money to things that are making us happier. And so we did. And so I think this idea of whatever it is that you care most about, and at least having some sort of structure, even if it's just once a year, that really helps me make sure that I'm living the way that I want to live and don't just sort of slide into weird spending habits.
I really like this. This is a really good way of thinking about this. It's not about what you spend money on. It's about being clear why you're doing it and making sure that you feel good about it, that it feels aligned and worthwhile. Yeah, I really like that, Keith, because of course different people might be good at saving money in different ways, but then spend money on different things, which could be quirky hobbies or maybe less quirky hobbies like traveling or, eating in nice places or whatever, but then they save money in other ways. And on that saving money idea, one kind of habit-based approach is to take really good care of the things that you have so that you have to replace them like as infrequently as possible. This matters the most with things that are more expensive. The car is the big one, right? Cars have gotten so expensive now. The average price of a new car in the US is now over $50,000, which is really just kind of breathtaking. First of all, it's usually a good idea to buy a used car, which is one of those places where being able to let go of the instinct to try to impress people with your stuff comes in handy. Because if you are not trying to impress people with your car, then you can just buy a used car and you're not suffering that penalty where as soon as a new car gets driven off the lot, its value drops 5% or whatever that is.
Ethan, I'm going to ask for forgiveness for being a little judgmental here about this topic. I can't hide my view about cars in that people, if you just decide you have the resources, you want to buy a new car, fine. If you feel like you need a new car, or if you buy like a midlife crisis car, I'm like, wow, You just bought a $50,000 car or a $70,000 car. You could have bought a $10,000 or a $20,000 used car, and you could have used that extra $30,000 to get the therapy you need to address whatever your underlying insecurity is. I know that sounds harsh, but
Yeah, that's a little judgmental.
it is. But I genuinely believe that. It's just so funny when you see like someone buy the midlife crisis car. It's so obvious. And I know they're trying to like make other people think that they're cool or they're awesome or feel a certain way, but at least my reaction is really the opposite of what I think the person intended. And so anyway, Keith's moment of judgment.
Yeah, cars they're just so expensive now that. But of course, here's the flip side, right? Is they're much better machines than they used to be, which means they can last a lot longer and need a lot less maintenance than they used to, which opens up this space. You know, you can buy a used car, buy a nice used car, whatever that means to you, but buy a used car with 100,000 miles on it, and you can easily drive it another 100,000 or 150,000. And so to me, like that seems like one of the ways, in addition to housing, which is the big one, that life has gotten so much more expensive. Of course, along with like college and childcare and healthcare, those are actually the big ones. Those are harder to like solve for, frankly. But the way to beat that system is to buy a car that's already been used a lot and use it for like the second half of its life, because that second half is so much longer and better and requires less maintenance than it used to. So to me, that's a big one where you could just opt into that. And if you're not trying to impress whoever with how nice your car is, then it's like, it's fine. There's almost no downside.
The strange thing about this is the thing that's really impressive at the end of the day, if you're someone who just cares about financial resources, is a huge bank account. And if you overpay for a car by like $30,000 or $40,000 as opposed to getting new, you do that for, that's a lifetime pattern of 30 years, and maybe you do that 5 times. So that's $150,000 in overpayment, and then you put that into the market. I can't do the math off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that ends up being over $500,000. And so these choices around these big ticket items like cars, the down the road consequences are incredibly profound in terms of the frankly free money that you give up to get them. The free money being, the returns you get off your investment. And as you said, housing, healthcare, childcare, cars, those are kind of the 4 big ticket items where, some of them you just have to pay, right? Like if you need health insurance, you need health insurance.
Yep.
But what are your options within them? And I think like cars, everybody has a choice, so long as you're not just scraping by, to not buy a new car and take the oodles of money and use it for other things.
Yeah, and like you said, that money can be invested, whether it's in just a high yield savings account in the bank or in some kind of index fund. That money that you don't spend can be invested and compound over years and years and decades, which is one of those principles that can get taken really far. One of the people who has taken it super far is Warren Buffett, maybe history's greatest investor. He was so aware of this reality that money that he spent couldn't be invested and compound over time. So he did some crazy penny pinching things. Like I think he and his wife traveled to New York when they were in their 20s. And somebody maybe was offering him a job. I can't remember the exact story. They were going to New York City. Their business was in Manhattan, and there's like, a zillion hotels in Manhattan. But instead of staying in one of them, he was so aware of the time value of money that he got them a hotel like somewhere in the suburbs, like north of the city, because it was cheaper. They traveled out there, stayed in this cheaper hotel, and then came back into the city to do things. I personally wouldn't make that choice, but he was right about that. that if you avoid spending money, it's the same as earning more money, and then you can invest it, and then that can earn money passively over time. So
that gets at a question of motivation for me, though. You're right. He's extreme, and the picture of the house that he still lives in Omaha, it's just like a standard suburban house. You know,
he never
like
lived in like a
a
mansion.
2004 like Toyota parked in front. It's not I don't think he's ever lived in a mansion. What is his motivation around money? You know, when you have more than you can do anything with, for someone like him, it seems like his main motivation is like keeping score almost.
Yeah, something like that.
And I know that's true for some people, but it's just interesting to note that, oh, okay, his main motivation around money is something like keeping score. I mean, for me, money equals security. I can, quit a job whenever I need to. If there's a health scare, covered. So for me, like the primary motivation behind saving money is for security. And I think we could probably walk through and, name a whole bunch of others to impress other people or as a tool to make life easier. There are all sorts of things here. And part of that spreadsheet exercise that I talked about before requires that you be honest with yourself about what your motivations actually are so that you can make the judgment calls around your spending.
If we could, I'd love to just step back for a second and look at some of the things that we've said. So we've talked about trying to free yourself from the instinct to impress people with possessions, aligning your style with timeless styles so you don't have to keep buying new things to stay in style or not worry about it at all. Taking care of the things that you own so that they last as long as possible. iPhones is one of the areas where this comes into play. If you can keep your phones for 4 years instead of 2 years, then you'll have to buy half as many over the course of your life. And I don't know exactly what that is, but it's thousands of dollars. So if you can do that with, a refrigerator if you own your own home, or, you're sort of like your suit jacket, your shoes and your boots and your winter jacket, all these things, like if you just take good care of them, you can have some of these things for 20 years easily if you, buy decent enough stuff.
I really like this, the whole buy it for life movement. I feel really drawn to. The other day I was needing to replace a broken like milk foamer thing that I think we got at IKEA for $2. Yeah, and it's really painful to me personally to throw something like that in the trash, because you just know it's gonna be there forever, end up in the ocean. And yeah, and it's also frustrating to have to go out and buy something new. And sometimes it seems like it's actually really difficult to identify what the sort of buy it for life version is. So as I was researching this, I think I was on a Reddit thread. The buy it for life people were like, the only buy it for life solution to this is just to buy a hand whisk. Because, now all these things like are USB rechargeable batteries built in, and it's depressing to think about something so small like that as being a consumer electronic, like disposable 2 to 3 year lifespan.
I agree with you on the buy it for life. There is a moral dimension of this in terms of the environmental impacts of the stuff that we buy. That's not our focus today, but that's obviously a real thing.
It is a deep problem and tension, though, in our ongoing investing conversations, because for the most part, and there are exceptions to this, companies that sell a product where people never have to buy it again have limited opportunities for profit growth. And so the entire capitalist marketplace is incentivized around companies like Apple releasing a phone every year to do a replacement cycle to capture more and more people's money. And, I would posit that this is a moral, ethical, fundamental flaw in how our capitalist system currently works, that we select against companies that build buy it for life products in favor of companies that frankly offer either a actual subscription service, or in the case of something like iPhones, a de facto subscription service where you're
Yeah.
constantly buying them over
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. I think you're right about this. It's hard to square it. Maybe something we can come back to another time. So I think I was making a list and then I lost track, but sort of let go of impressing people, adopt classic styles, take care of your possessions so you don't have to replace them as frequently. And then another one we talked about was choosing your hobbies and activities in such a way that the things that you enjoy tend to be cheaper. Camping with friends is incredibly fun and a pretty inexpensive vacation. So if that's something that you come to love, you're just in a great position. Eating dinner with friends at someone's house, and so on. And then, yours about looking back at your spending and making sure that it's aligned with what you actually care about and what's meaningful to you and so on. And I think the thing that I find interesting about this, when you sort of look at it in total, is that the thing that allows you to do each of those is around kind of crafting your identity. And choosing who you will be and what kind of life you'll have. Because if you end up in a sort of identity that's not aligned with these things and is in tension with those kinds of things, then it's going to be hard. If you end up in kind of social circles where, what kind of car you drive really matters, then it becomes pretty difficult. And, if you have a high paying career, maybe it's not a problem for you financially. But, if you don't have that kind of career, or if you do, but you find that you want to change your career, you can end up being sort of stuck. I've always been fascinated by this question about how you choose who you are. If you can do that with an eye toward how much that lifestyle will cost, it ends up being a big driver of the sort of amount of flexibility and freedom that you have as you move forward in life.
I'm intrigued by the thing here about your social circles, because as human beings, we're so influenced by others around us, point out
so much,
that the choice of who to associate with is kind of a choice about what your future identity is going to be. And this really hit home for me. As I mentioned, I've been doing some financial coaching, and I've been working with or talking with a lot of very high earners who are in these social circles where there are certain norms around spending money, like the type of house that you have and the cars that you drive and where you go to vacation and all sorts of things like that. And it is stunning to me how you can have an annual income of $700,000 or even $800,000 and not only have no money, but be in crazy amount of debt and be stressed all the time and miserable. And these people are miserable. And what shocks me about some of the conversations is that when you actually dig in and try and see if there's any room to change, to sort of move into a different way of thinking, it is almost impossible for people to consider that, because it's so deep now into their own identity that shifting is almost like giving up their sense of self, that it feels like a mortal threat.
Yeah.
And so many people just get stuck in this, and it's really sad.
What occurred to me as you were talking is that it's often, if you end up being married, if you're someone who gets married, this choice about sort of who you want to be, your lifestyle, what you value, and how it affects your spending is not just for you. It has to be your spouse too. You could imagine someone kind of doing this right for themselves, but then marrying someone who had like a very different conception and ending up in a bad situation anyway. This will work better if it's something that you decide when you're young and can kind of like build your life from the ground up as an adult.
It's tough because of the society that we all live in. The national religion of the United States is not actually Christianity, but I actually think it is greed. Like that is the foundation of our national religion in a lot of ways, and it requires something to escape that gravitational pull. And escaping the gravitational pull is like critical and is almost the entire ball game for a lot of people, assuming you earn a basic level of income in the first place. But the psychological aspects behind that are fascinating and terrifying. And I think about people, like the $700,000 earners who are miserable, and what they have is not first and foremost a money problem. I think they have like a spiritual and psychological problem first and foremost, and that we need to see it through that lens.
Yeah, it's almost like the question it leads you to is, what is it you need to have so you can reject a national religion of your worth being measured by your wealth? What's the thing that allows you to measure your worth in another way? Because that's what you need to reject the idea that it's how much stuff you have or how big your house is or how fancy your car is. There's some critical piece there, and I'm not quite sure what it is.
I'm so glad you raised this because it gives me a chance to talk about a fantasy that I've been having that is either a legitimate political proposal or more likely it's sort of a science fiction short story. I keep going back to the fact that no matter how much money in Elon Musk or a Warren Buffett or a Mark Zuckerberg have, they want more. And it's clearly like they're bringing in more than they could possibly spend for themselves. So for these ultra wealthy people, it can't be about trying to get the next size yacht. They've kind of already gotten to the end of the line. The only thing left is competition. And so in this imaginary world that I've been dreaming about, that your bank account is allowed to get to 999 million, all nines. And then at that point, essentially you have 100% tax of any money above that. But the key innovation is that in this fantasy crazy idea, money beyond $1 billion, you accrue some kind of points, like social contributor points.
Yeah.
And essentially creates like a leaderboard of who's kicking butt, but that money gets used for social purpose. So these ultra rich people still have a venue to play out their competition. And you can imagine there being like a crazy award ceremony every year where the person who contributed, got the most points or is in first place, gets some sort of big trophy and is lauded by society. And by the way, we used that money to build a high-speed national train network this year,
right?
Et cetera, et cetera.
It just shifts the arena of competition slightly.
Yeah, it motivates these egomaniacs. Look at Trump. Trump's biggest credit goal right now seems to be trying to get a Nobel Peace Prize.
Right.
Like these guys want recognition.
Yeah.
And right now the only way they have to do that is their net worth. So how could we as a society shift that? So anyway, I'll stop there from my way out there fantasy idea. Like I said, probably a short story. is all there is to it. But yeah,
There's
I've been
something
thinking about
interesting
that.
there. There is something interesting there, especially since the tax rates would be the same for everyone, it wouldn't give anyone an advantage or a disadvantage. All right. Well, this has been a good conversation. Should we wrap it up here?
This is a departure from what we normally talk about, but I think in a way that has me thinking and reminding myself of why we actually invest. What is the purpose behind it?
And we have a lot more control over our spending and saving than we do over our investment returns, as long as we can kind of free ourselves from this status competition that people can get stuck in.